All righty, good afternoon, everyone. We'll call to order the Flagstaff Public Safety Citizens Committee meeting, January the 28th. Thank you all for participating. Been a lot of effort. It will be a lot of time in improving the community. Before we move on to the management, or before we move into the presentations, discussion about schedule. You want to explain that, Shannon?
So our last meeting currently on everyone's calendar is February. We are looking to reschedule the emergency management presentation, but we have deputy city manager interviews and a meet and greet during the time that we're supposed to be doing this. So we wanted to check with the team if you'd prefer to meet Monday, February 9th that week, or if you would like to wait until the following week and just meet on Wednesday, February 18th.
Speak freely.
Either one works for me.
I would vote for February 18th.
Dates again? February 9th or February 18th. Either day works for me. We're good. Either one.
18th works for me, 9th doesn't.
Okay.
I'd go with the 18th as well.
That's what it sounds like. Thank you.
Right. There's no other dissension. We will select the 18th.
So we're canceling the February 4th?
No.
Oh, we're not.
Still have February 4th. We just won't have a meeting on February 11th.
It is a great day. That's when my mom and dad afforded me the opportunity to take my first breath. So 5 years ago.
Looking for cupcakes or something.
Happy to see you last night.
We've got one more schedule question for you all, if you wouldn't mind. So I can get meetings on the calendars for you. After that February 18th meeting, does this group want to meet weekly to start your deliberations, bi-weekly, or some other time frame? Because we'd like to try and get, your next group of meetings on your calendars, and also make sure that we have a facility that we can book for those conversations as well.
My only conflict is I'm gone pretty much that last week of February. Otherwise, whatever to the committee is fine.
Just weekly and see this through. Bi-weekly, just bringing it out.
Is there a specific number of meetings after the presentations? Because we're through the end of the year, right? The committee?
Through the end
Oh, just through May.
Good
You'll
news.
want to have your presentation ready by the end of May so that can go to council that first part of June.
So the plan as it is to have the presentations. And then we had a meeting with Shannon this week. And we'll get all the information into a spreadsheet, begin to look at the money. High probability we'll have Mr. Tatter rejoin us just to look at different funding sources and then begin to make, winnow through the information we've received, determine what the pots of money may be and what the actual ask to the voters could be. So that's probably going to be the more, the heavier lift is sorting through all that and probably having, the chiefs in and out and answering questions and those types of things. So disposition of the group every week, see it through or go to bi-weekly.
I think we should keep doing it weekly.
I agree. I think
I would agree.
Let's knock it out.
Anyone online feel differently?
I think that's a great concept. I support that.
This is Michelle, and I support going every week. Thanks.
All right, thank you one and all. Chief?
Hey, so it's just, again, with so much appreciation for your intellect, focus, and attention for those here online and here in the room. Sean Conley, I'm your police chief. So, last week we went over those 3 big pillars of our operations: patrol, investigations, and then support services. So we have a couple others to talk about in the support services world. We start the day. hopefully get through those very timely. And then we're going to walk you through some of the other things related to our PFM study and talk about some actual numbers, some capital, some technology. So we just so much. It's interesting. I just drove up today from the Chiefs Conference. All the state police chiefs have been sequestered in a building, which is always interesting. I'm gonna drive back down tonight for some sessions in the morning, but these types of conversations amongst all communities right now are paramount. It's on the tip of everybody's tongue. Besides immigration enforcement, obviously taking a lot of time and energy from local law enforcement right now. These conversations rooted in staffing, these conversations rooted in how we continue to evolve and be modern as police departments related to our needs from capital perspectives, fleet management perspectives, and technology just owns the day. So we're on it here in this community, and I want to thank you for that. There are some people that are ahead of us in this journey, and there are some people that are trying to catch up, and I'm really grateful for where we are. So what we'll do is we'll have Allison come up and talk about records.
Again, my name's Allison Hughes. I'm the Sports Services Section Director. So records takes over after an officer writes the report, then takes the intake, data entry, citation processing. They do all our body camera review and redactions. They handle all of our public records requests and any legal compliance for records releases. Right now, our staffing is 2 customer service reps, 4 records technicians, 2 lead technicians, and 1 supervisor. We recently did a reorganization where we pulled an FTE from the records section to put into property control because that position only had 1 person maintaining our entire fleet. And the need was greater there at that time for the 82 vehicle fleet that we have to have a second person to help. And with this reorganization, we created a structure for promotion. There's a pathway, career pathway from customer service up, and every step of the way you learn a new skill and develop yourself to move in the organization. It helps us retain people. 2025, our workload, we saw over 10,000 report requests. We also disseminate reports for the county sheriff's office as well as the jail. Our staff reviewed and redacted over 288 video requests, body cam requests. And that totaled over 500 hours of staff time to review and redact. And our average turnaround on a body cam request is about 4 to 6 weeks. That challenge is because people know that those cameras exist, public records law, we get more requests. The more data we have, the more people want access to it, and that takes time. And our processes are heavily manual. We are just starting to utilize technology a little bit more, but there are better software systems out there for review and redaction. There are AI features that were not open to us previously, and most of that had to be done manually. So automated redaction, as well as digital workflow management for those systems. So we know when a records request comes in, how does it process through the system? How long does it take us? Most of these numbers are estimates. We have a better idea of how long on the body camera because we charge a specific amount requests based off of time. The rest of our requests are harder to manage. Right now, it's all done with Excel spreadsheets. Having a system in place that tracks that process would make things more efficient for our staff. Evidence and property. What does evidence do? They maintain a chain of custody for all of our physical and digital evidence from booking through release or destruction. Current inventory is over 100,000 items between 2 locations. The bottom picture is our on-site location, which is chock full. There on the left, those spinny Filofax are full of boxes and envelopes of more items. At the back wall is all envelopes. Around the corner, there's more shelves. We have 2 secure sites closets on site, and then we have overflow. There's a couple closets outside of that area that we use for overflow of items as well. And then the top picture is our warehouse facility, East Yard, and it's full. All of those shelves are chock full all the way to the ceiling. And this is all managed by 2 evidence technicians. And there's no dedicated supervisor. The support services manager manages animal control, evidence, records. They really have to diversify, so we don't have an SME or lead for that role. In 2025, they intaked over 6,800 items. They destroyed and burned drugs of over 400 to 700 items, and then we returned 700 items to owners. The responsibilities include the secure and climate appropriate storage, court and prosecutor coordination, public property releases, retention and compliance, extremely high volume, legal sensitivity, and we have significant limitations to our RMS system.
How long do you retain the evidence?
Depends on the case, whether it's felony or misdemeanor. It depends on the case, and then it depends on how long the case has gone through. So even though it's gone through court processes, some of that still has to be retained afterwards. And if there's warrants tied to those cases, some of those. One of the things that we, when we transferred to our recent or current RMS system, we struggled with is that we lost our ability to do a purge process. Lost our ability to pull a report from our RMS that said what was available to purge and what still needed to be retained. And we had to rebuild that, and it took us years to rebuild that process, but it's very, very manual and time consuming. So we're slowly catching up to getting purged, but because of that, we still have a lot of items.
It's a great question. I don't know if you all saw this Sarah Saganitso case on Hulu. That was a part of a documentary, not a cold case, but it had a lot of intricacy to it, to a murder up at a hospital many, many years ago. Prior, when that case was going on, we were allowed to get rid of everything. And the county attorney ordered the police department to get, I wanted to go back and with all the new DNA technology and all the stuff to really do a modern dive. And it was all gone. There's now a state law just so for homicide, sexual assault, and some of those part 1 violent crimes, we can never destroy that evidence. So we have to live with it. I always asked the evidence ladies, like, hey, see that box on the bottom and the middle shelf? How are we getting that out? Right? So think about the process of having a modern storage facility and to listen to them, how they have to move everything around and then get over there with a ladder and
The filing cabinets in the middle and the bottom picture, those are paper copies of every voucher for every item in evidence. Every time we move an item, we have to reprint that voucher and save it. Burned on the system and nobody trusts it, so we keep a physical copy of every voucher for every item, and that has to be maintained as well. And so having a system that we can have a little bit more trust and integrity in would really go a long ways to making their lives a lot easier from where they're at.
Question on Linus. Dorothy?
Yeah, this is Dorothy Gishi. My question was referring to what was just stated about destroying files, and it's good to know that we have law in place now to preserve previous cases, or I should say of cases regarding murdered victims, because I think the department did a huge disservice to the Sarah Saganitso case. And so it's good to know that there's laws in place now to protect files being destroyed like that.
Animal control. While they don't assist or support every police-related call, they often are called if on certain cases when animals are involved. They can support domestic violence cases, welfare checks, traffic, and they deal with a lot of wildlife issues. 2025, they responded to over 2,300 calls for service. 1,600 of those calls were handled by those two officers that you see there in the bottom left alone. The rest were picked up by officers or police aides. They monitor 24/7. They work 7 days a week. They overlap on 1 day a week. They don't have a dedicated supervisor or lead. Again, it is one supervisor for all of those roles. They have taken 338 reports in the last year. They wrote 29 citations, impounded 417 animals. They have responded to a variety of wildlife calls. In the top picture is Brooke, who had rescued a goose who had gotten wrapped up in fishing line. And it actually happens quite a bit. We probably do one of those a year at least. And they also are responsible for processing animals for rabies. And with the issues on NAU campus with all the bats, they processed over 90 bats last year. Sorry, 73 bats, 8 skunks, 7 raccoons, and 2 cats. There's only 2. They work 7 days a week, and they respond to a ton of calls. They get called in, or they just answer their phone. If an officer's on duty and has to take a call because one of them isn't available, more often than not, one of these 2 is answering that phone to help them through that call. So more staffing, more training. And then admin. So admin handles the internal systems that keep the department functioning, budget and fiscal management, our grants, clients. We manage some of the hiring and onboarding and training logistics, policy and procurement, reporting and audits. Currently, the staffing is 1 admin specialist, 1 support services manager, and myself. And we are responsible for the department's over $20 million budget. And that spans across the 8 programs. And we manage up to 10 to 12 grants per year. And that's everything from the application to the closeout. And those have to be managed throughout the year. We are responsible for state and federal reporting and audits. All of our crime data has to get reported yearly. And there's a variety of different applications that we have to manage. NIBRS is the biggest one, is our state crime reporting to the state and to the federal level. We don't have a centralized admin software to manage or track any of this. Most of it's done individually on spreadsheets. And we don't have a good data analytics program. We are starting the process with Peregrine for our crime data, but internally our systems do not have the ability to provide us analytics for resource, time management, overtime, any of that. So data systems, analytic tools, and more staffing to improve efficiencies in those areas.
Say one thing real quick. Talking about, I'm just talking with the, you can see over here real quick. Today was a good day. We talked about AI, we talked about programs, efficiencies, everything we were talking about last week, being able to maximize our efforts with stuff. With what she just mentioned with Peregrine coming in as we're moving into a new CAD system, how we don't have the issues where data can't get purged or corrected or accessed or spend years of loading millions of pieces of information into a new CAD system. With what's being done with the Peregrine system, sat down with one of the trainers today, and for me on the fire side, pulling the districts that we send the billing to recoup the cost of what we're doing in the center, which was taking me when I did it last year, and it was just about the last 3 quarters of the year, not the whole year. It took me almost 3 weeks to get all that data in order. Manually pulling it out of the CAD system, going back and manually checking each call because of how we had to, you can't filter it out by certain things, to then go through every call to make sure it was being billed correctly. So now we don't get into disputes. Took me 3 weeks before sitting down with her today. I had the entire first 6 months of the fiscal year done in 5 minutes and accurate. And we can now set up a report that automatically pulls on the first of the month, emails it to everybody that needs to email to in different files. We can then take that with what the call data is, putting it on heat maps, different bar graphs, charts, whatever, and save hundreds of hours of time that's just wasted in trying to manipulate data and worksheets. Yeah.
Is it a program that was purchased or?
No, right now it is free, through, currently free through, an association with the state. And I don't know all the inner workings behind it, but I asked our IT, lady on the way over, Sean Armour, and she said currently free. We're not paying anything for it. And it's unreal what can be done with it. Access to it and it's used right.
What we're starting to see in the business is a lot of lobbying and legislative appropriations for some of the things that police departments struggle to pay for, that everybody's starting to realize are basic needs, especially in the technology world. You're seeing it with how we're able to staff some extra off-duty in schools. You're seeing it in the Peregrine technology. So a lot of that stuff is coming to us through state appropriations and bills that go through on behalf of those legislators and those associations.
And started using it to look at, when we're running a name or looking at a subject that's being called in. And on the back end with the AI, being able to tie all the information together instantly to see what other issues are going on, other issues with the address, that save, and really what it comes down to is officer safety on the other end. They're not sitting there waiting for information to come back. Well, I got to click through 7 or 8 different screens to try and find it. This all pulls it into one right on the screen. The officer can access the same screen on their patrol vehicle. We can look at on our end and tie all those things together if there's a safety issue right out of the gate, rather than having to delay that and have something else happen at that address, that person, or whatever else is going on. So phenomenal stuff, officer safety, and then just efficiency of workflow. So I just wanted to add that. That was today.
Yeah.
So-
And my promise and our promise to you and the community is we're going to be aggressive. It's part of the reason I'm down there for the week with the Chiefs Association and everybody, having that, when we see these opportunities through legislation or appropriations, and I know the city does a great job, and Stacy's back there with her magic wand on a lot of things, that we have an obligation to do that first and foremost, right? But there just gets to a point in time. My story on that is that virtual reality room and situational, where we can put officers through hundreds of different reps very efficiently a year in scenarios like a big video game. That was a state appropriation, and this police department had to decline it because there wasn't space for it. Another police department gobbled it up right away. So those are the types of things, and being a state of preparedness in all of these conversations where you can't miss those opportunities. Really, really insightful. You know, we talked about those 3 pillars of our operations, but I will tell you, in the evolution of policing, community engagement is one of those pillars as well. We'll talk a little bit about chief's discretion and how we operationalize things. There's things that aren't chief's discretion, patrol investigations. This has always been a chief's discretion in a lot of ways. And when we talk today about PFM, you'll hear me talk about baselining. This is this assessment's baseline. And then there's this bucket over here of chief's discretions, where I can play chess with the pieces on the board a little bit based on the values of the community, based on the things that we think. But over the years, community engagement has become paramount. If you don't have relationships in community in this business anymore, we've seen examples of that around the country. A lot of times our data and our perceptions lock us into a mindset of that's what the issue is. You go meet with community and it's a totally different issue. Being able to open up those doors and those windows for them to communicate and make this police department their police department. I know Dorothy's on here. She's the chair of my Indigenous Police Chiefs Advisory Board. I've learned so much perspective on their needs and the things that we need to do as a police department on behalf of her community. So I have a public information officer. It's actually a sergeant position. And that one position is responsible for it all. So that position produced 1,200 social media posts. If you are not on social media, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, or X, it's the modern telephone in a lot of ways. If you're not on it, you're going to fail. in messaging and communication with your community. So 1,200 posts. We did 129 media releases. And what is a media release? When we have a high profile incident or anything that we believe the community should be made aware of, and the media is going to come knocking anyways, or we want to get that proactively out there, we'll do a media release on that. So he did 129 of those. We participated in 85 events in the community. I will tell you, I want this number to get higher. I think there's more room for growth in that, but there's only so much capacity for this sergeant and the collateralness of how we community engage moving forward. We do have a volunteer program. Anybody want to be a volunteer? Bring it. We did 92 hours per month of volunteerism in some of our most important missions. And there's some of that in recruitment and some other places with our firearms. There's a volunteer reserve in there doing that. And then we have a reserve program. If you want to become a fully sworn ASPO certified police officer and be a reserve, we have a pathway for you to do that. And come out and do that. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. We did 25 hours per month. Recruitment and retention. We did not have, and we've gotten better, but we had to, whatever from Paul, however that works. We had to borrow from our patrol division, and Colin and I had some big conversations in a room about the importance of this, pulling members from patrol because this was not staffed. So imagine the avenue that feeds you, what puts food on our table is our recruitment and our retention. And so we've taken that with what we had and created a dedicated recruitment and retention unit. Incredibly proud of them at the end of the day. I'll tell you, tied to that is a marketing and advertising budget, right? I think we're $2,000 you told me the other day. I just had the Diamondbacks reach out and they asked if we wanted to advertise. There's that great Flagstaff advertisement down there by the ballpark. Come visit Flagstaff. And they were somewhere between $7,000 and $14,000 for us to run some ads. I have $2,000. And so when you talk about that, this group processed 244, there's 3 of them. This group processed 244 applications, 133 made it through initial screening. We hired 17 this year. Remember that conversation that Colin had about traditionally 20 to 30 leaving this department a year? And we told you that number was 6 this year. That's where we gained this year. I'm so proud of everybody. There's a lot of factors in that though, a lot of factors tied to that. And I'll talk a little bit about why that's important as it relates to an ask. Moving down the road. I'm a training coordinator. Here's my story. Just super excited, immersing myself in everything. And one of the firearms guys comes up and you need to qualify this year. You got to qualify every year in ASPO. So I just qualified in the other place, but I'm like, yep, let's do it. Let's go to the range and let's qualify. He goes, okay, I'll drop you a pin. I'm like, great. I get a pin drop a little bit later and I look at it and I'm like, it's 8 miles down the 40, 6 miles down a forest road to a dirt berm in the middle of the woods. That's where this police department was participating in firearms training. Knowing you have a SWAT team, knowing you have that annual qualification, knowing you should have quarterly proficiency in an urban environment. So I went out there and qualified on it. That's an example of training coordination. This is currently done by one civilian person. She coordinated 143 individual department-wide training sessions for this department in this past year. She has 44 job duties and responsibilities. She's incredibly amazing, and we just are so blessed to have her. But you need a dedicated training unit supporting a civilian training coordinator. School resource officers.
Chief, that's where Timberline's going to kick in now, correct?
From the range perspective. Yeah, and I think and so we have been able to harvest internally a sergeant position. Again, continuing, I told you this from the front, our obligation to you is before we ask for anything, take a deep dive into what we currently have. There are days I feel like I'm trying to find meat on a skeleton, but we did it. And I'm so proud of them because it's so important. So we have one training sergeant assigned out there. He doesn't have a team with him. He'll work with Chris and we'll work on those 3 proficiencies. But the other proficiencies that ASPO's mandates are defensive tactics, bad verbal communication and hands-on communication leads to officer-involved shootings. And so that DT perspective is so important. You'll watch so many videos around the country of that verbal direction not going well, that initial hands-on not going well, and the next thing you know, guns are out. And so that, and then driving. We're in our cars all day. We don't have a driving track. We don't have a place. We train down with our recruits down in another couple cities that offer that up for us. And so, yeah, that whole training piece, it's really important.
So acquired the outside shooting range from Timberline.
So there is a lease attached to it of the Savage Camp. Is that what they call it?
I think it got taken out.
Okay. There was a rifle range in it.
Because that's
Yeah,
hopefully still available for citizens.
yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going the opposite direction there.
We do hope to use that facility as a community engagement tool, as we have had a lot of requests to do things in there with community related to personal safety, firearms training, and just a whole bunch of safety stuff. So we're super excited about it. School resource officers, pre-George Floyd, they were in a lot of schools. Post-George Floyd, everybody wanted us out of the schools. Agnostic on a lot of that related to community values and perceptions. And we backed out of those. And then we reoperationalized, pandemic hits, staffing drops. Now we're back in a place where they want us back in the schools, but we're having to calibrate out of that with things we don't have. How we currently have 2 positions currently vacant, how we currently operationalize that, to your question, through appropriations and state funding through the Department of Ed and a company called ODM, Off Duty Management. We were able to train up almost 10, I think 9 officers related to being school safety officers. It's not a full-blown SRO, and they're paid off duty when they're not working to go in and work Summit and 2 middle schools. I've met with the principals of Cocoa and Flag and the superintendent. There's a desire to have us in more schools. We don't have the operational capacity right now, and we still got to have that conversation about funding. But for now, we're covering those 3 schools, only those 3, with an off-duty officer. Housing officer, we have 1 officer, 40% of that salary is augmented through the housing department. I think I mentioned this earlier, just a little over 300 units of city housing in the city. There is a vision for more moving forward. That officer who does that 40% of the time is also managing all the sex offender registrations in the city and a whole bunch of other stuff. He was involved in about 790 incidents where he was involved in documentation or participating. And we are not at a place where I want to be in city housing. I know there's an old legend around here. I don't remember his name, that used to walk the kids to school from the city housing facilities. And that's that extra level of service, almost an expectation of us internally, and I hope values externally related to that, where we want to get to that. Any questions on that one? Talked about the workload assessment through the company of retired world-class chiefs, statisticians, and academics. We're continuing to get more information. I appreciate your grace on this. This thing's flowing in fast. It's a 150-page report that broke down the whole department. We're going to provide you with some of the baseline, and I want to make sure you understand that's baseline data on some of those 3 main operational pillars. They did a yeoman's job of getting us some of this information upstream. We will also, once we're done with the final, we would like to bookend that, what we tell you with that. And if you have a bunch of free time and you want to go look at all the statistical analysis and data analysis that got us to these numbers, we're going to make sure we afford that to you moving forward. This is a really objective, professional way, because we can anecdotally have feelings about the work volume and the pressure. Community can have that same thing. This is taking something very objective, very academically rigor, and running it through a process of understanding modern policing and the needs. And I talked to a couple other chiefs just over the couple of days. They've all are going through this process right now in a lot of places. So I'm going to have Colin come up and talk about that baseline number just from the patrol perspective related to the PFM recommendations.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Colin C. I'm representing the Patrol Division today. For anybody at home that did get to meet me last time. First of all, I'd like to say nothing we do in police work in the Patrol Division occurs without the support services team. So from our vehicles being ready, our fleet being maintained, from, the evidence being kept, from the calls coming through to us and dispatch, like that doesn't go without the support services. I think sometimes that gets underappreciated. We talk about needing to put more officers out on the street and more detectives in the detective division. So I wanted to give Allison and Casey a lot of credit for the work that they do and how they make our jobs possible. First, I reflected on a lot of the questions I think that we had last time. Why has there been turnover? Why are we losing 20 officers a year historically since when I started in 2006? Chief just got into the workload assessment that PFM did. So basically the national model is 20% of administrative time, training time for an officer per shift. So that's about 2 hours per day. And then 40% of that time is, responding to calls for service or typing the reports from the calls for service. The other 40% of that time is, available time to go engage community and be proactive. So that's like autonomy. So anybody that's ever studied motivation, I study that quite a bit, trying to be a better leader. Like if people don't have, control over what they do in their free time while at work and creativity, they're not going to enjoy their job. So what the data showed objectively, so analyzing our calls for service, our officers have about 10 to 11% available time in their shift. So what that basically means is they're taking calls from dispatch throughout their entire shift, and then they go home. They're being told what to do all the time. And it's very busy. I've been a part of that 10% available time since 2006. It's very fun, but it's not sustainable, and it does burn our officers out, and that does lead to turnover. I thought, when you asked me, well, why is that? Well, when I was in hiring from 2018 to 2020, hands-on, or I conducted every single exit interview of every patrol officer that left the agency. A lot of it was, I can go to another agency, lower workload, maybe a little bit more pay. We've been very competitive with our pay, trying to keep up with the market. But work a little bit less and have a better quality of life, and probably gets to somewhere where that PFM national standard, that 40% available time, 40% calls for service, and 20% of, administrative training time. And so many officers that I know have gone to communities. I think in 2022, 2023, we lost 10 officers to Queen Creek and Chandler. I'm sorry, but they have different social issues in the city of Flagstaff. They have different community issues. I'm saying there's more or less crime, but it's just different, and it takes up their time differently, and they're able to enjoy their work better, I guess, working in those communities. So I think, what this slide shows, PFM's recommending that we add 8 officers to the patrol division and 2 supervisors. So when I showed you guys the map last week of the east and west side of town, that's going to add more police officers on each side of town to really, spread that workload around. And that's not including the 16 that I already have that are, either in academy and training, true vacancies, or on some type of leave. So basically that's adding 24 officers to my section of that 52 officers that bid for patrol. So I'd like to give you just the last 24 hours, what it's like being one of those 52 police officers that are basically providing our core service to our city. So last night we had a call in sick on our graveyard shift. So the swing shift had to stay over. Now, mind you, that swing shift's already working with 10% available time. So then they had to stay over for 4 hours and take more calls. And then members of our day shift were unavailable. So I had to have one of my direct reports come in as a lieutenant and come in and cover the day shift or cover the graveyard shift before his actual day shift last night. And then I think one of our committee members is security director for FUSD. I get a call from FUSD saying, hey, maybe about half our students are going to walk out of school tomorrow at several locations all across the city. Just talking with Casey here when he came in, we had 30 available units that were working. So I told you on a given day shift, I have a sergeant and maybe 5 or 6. Also that 52, I had to call in all kinds of resources on their days off and get 10% available time anyway. So they're overworked during their shifts. Now they got to come in and cover to keep for public safety. And we do that anytime there's any type of First Amendment assembly But yeah, we have, 500 kids in front of City Hall, which you just did, and we have 500 kids on 4th Street and up on Cedar. We have to keep it safe. We overtax those resources, and that's what does lead to turnover. And, they can go to other communities and work less with different societal issues. So,
If I can add to that too, 911's still popping. And so we did an all call to the whole department to come in and manage these events. This is a one incident police city. 1 or 2 incidents away from not having anybody to go. If I would have get a fatality wreck on the east side while this was going on, or calling if a significant crime came in where we had to activate investigations, we're tapped. And so I think that's a really good 24-hour snapshot of kind of the daily life of our members and what we're trying to wrangle.
yeah, just
So, I mean, driving sleep deprived, they say is more dangerous than driving drunk. You're calling someone in to work the grave shift leading up to their day shift. Is there any space to ensure enough time off between shifts to like get adequate sleep?
ideally, yes, but honestly, no. I mean, people do this job because they love it and they want to help their community. So if they get asked, if they, hey, can you come in 5 hours early to cover a shift? They're gonna do it. Is there time? I think if we get to that, that work-life balance to where there is, time to have more time between shifts, I hopefully, I think we can get there. One is getting that 16 officers, that how we do that is how Chief described. We only lose 6 in a year. And the 6 that we lost, I mean, it was very different circumstances, but we got to do things right. You got to keep doing things right. We got to keep that hiring team motivated to keep hiring officers. Because if I have the authorized people that I'm already allotted, it's extra and patrol officer, or 2 supervisors and 8 police officers, we're going to be in a really good place. And I think the need to call people in on their time off, because they're covering so many different specialty jobs other than just their patrol job, is going to be easier for us.
To that point, there are a lot of departments that have contracts in their relationships that mandate 10-hour shifts. And if you don't get that 10 hours, there's enhanced pay, that 10-hour block. The other thing I want to be completely real about, help me out on this, and transparent, is it's not uncommon at times to see some of our officers and our supervisors sleeping in the building. It's just not worth going home for an hour or 2 because they've been held over, they've been tapped out all night to then have to come back in and help, right?
Yeah.
Just being straight with that. I don't have bunks, and so they're sleeping in chairs on floors sometimes because it's just not worth driving home.
Huge health detriment and a risk to all of you.
Yeah, and you'll see in our north expansion, there's a recharge room in there, and we'll talk a little bit. These are small little pieces to help as we all move forward with this.
Well, I could tell you health detriment. I've been a part of that 10%. Officers, chief, and another agency's probably been a part of that 10%. What that means in your 10-hour shift, most likely you don't eat lunch. And then you're not taking care of yourself. And if you do eat, it's probably not healthy. So then years of doing that is what does the resilience of the officer after we've had them for 3 or 4 years.
Ripping into a Circle K to use the restroom to have to rip, right?
Energy drinks, unhealthy stuff. So, if we can get to that, 40% of available time, 20% for training and, physical and mental resiliency on their shift, and making sure their basic training is taken care of at the beginning of their shift and they're properly briefed by their supervisor. All their administrative stuff is taken care of. I think that's the wellness model of an officer moving forward that we want. I mean, this 10% model, I mean, it is a lot of fun when you work a shift because the shift flies by, but you really aren't taking care of yourself and it's not sustainable. And I've had moments in my career change my diet or my physical fitness routine, or else, I want to, hopefully live to retirement and then live well beyond that. The average age of police officers, I don't know what the study shows now, but it's like 50s or something like that. And there's a bill going through the legislature to try to reduce the age for Medicare. So for first responders, because we come out of these professions with so many problems, we're doing a much better job. Yeah, I mean, it's running calls like that nonstop, coming in on your days off. It does.
There's a reason patrol cars smell like fast food sometimes.
Fair.
So I think, if we can get our 16 vacancies hired, and I'm confident we're going to do that. And I think we have the tools in place and the leadership in place to do that. I really do. And, we add these 10 officers just in the patrol area, plus what we need to do in the area. We're going to this a sustainable place for people to want to come and work, but then also stay. Because once we get them into 5, 6, 7 years, now we've got a well-experienced officer that's servicing community and providing the service that you guys probably have experienced at times versus when you have a 1 or 2 year officer. They're great, but they just don't have the knowledge and the skill set and the decision-making that a more experienced officer would have that our community needs, absolutely needs. And, one thing, just want to say a little bit more about patrol, specialized units like SWAT. Lieutenant Beckman was our SWAT team leader for years and years. You think about anything that's really specialized, like military units, like maybe special force groups, they probably train 95% of the time and deploy 5% of the time. Police officers, we deploy 99% of the time, and we train maybe 1% of our time. And luckily with Chris and our training coordinator, we're kind of bridging that gap. And we're trying to start a training unit, but this modern facility, get these officers actually in some training scenarios more before you see catastrophe that you see with other police departments that fail across the country. And we're prideful in what we're doing. We're not going to have that happen in this community, but we got to put the time into training. We can't just be sending 90% of their shift to calls all day because it's not going to be the outcome I think we want as a community. So basically the cost of that, one-time startup cost would be probably about $1.6 million to give them the vehicles that they need and the equipment, the radios, the technology, computers. And then about 1.8, I think, is the ongoing cost to increase by 10 police officers and 2 supervisors. So that $3.4 million, that includes the one-time and the ongoing cost. The ongoing cost is about half that.
Any questions on the patrol slide?
What is the police aides for police aides? What is that position?
Yeah, I apologize. Our police aides, they kind of take some of the ancillary calls that our police officers used to respond to. So a lot of our civil issues, some of our traffic investigations, they assist officers with evidence handling and processing. So they take a lot of our calls. They're probably some of our top call takers in the patrol division. So they free up officers to respond to emergencies. So we try to keep our response times in the community down to 5 minutes or less on like active crimes and violence. So those police aides are taking some of the lower priority stuff to free up those officers. So that number changed a little bit from the last presentation. They came out with some more final reporting and they changed that to 4 police aides. We currently have 3. So we put more of those police aides on every single squad because right now we have 6 core patrol squads. We only have aides on 3 of them, so it put an aide on every squad, and probably when one squad is the busiest, probably on one of our day shifts. Did that answer your question?
Yes, I was just curious whether your police aides would be trained in any other kind of like mental or behavioral health.
Yeah, we do give them de-escalation training because, they're kind of they also protect our city facilities. I forgot to mention that. They're at City Hall and our public libraries. So they deal with a lot of, mentally ill or impaired people, and they're kind of like they're to communicate to the patrol officers, hey, we have a problem here, and they have they have access to our radios for us to come assist. So yeah, we give them some of the first responder training that police officers get.
I really like where your mind is. And I think just to be really clear with where this perspective is from a chief's level, this concept of civilianizing some of this out in the community does multiple things. First of all, it's very cost effective. To be full-blown police officer, really important. The second thing is we see so many things in our policing world now, and Casey and Alice can speak that come into us that have nothing to do with part 1 violent, part 1 burglary, which these officers are trained for. So being able to take something that's in the middle and send them to those calls is another strategy of trying to get to that available time. And I think the other part of this, and you're going to see this throughout, is there's just been a tremendous push to really do it. You put somebody through a police academy and you give them a bunch of police training, and then they end up doing stuff that you don't need all that training for. It's not a correct alignment of the skill sets and the training. So we love the police aid concept, and the goal is to have 1 on every squad. That's one of the best models, taking all that other ancillary stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir.
So on the 1.6, initial startup capital investment into it, cars that we're getting, are they advanced for future enhancements, or they work with our current system? Are they built for new systems that will assist police officers?
So Alice is probably the expert in cars, but I know our cars, you know, if we get a new piece of fleet or a new vehicle, you know, it's set up with a cradle point, which basically has internet Wi-Fi within the car, so it can power all kinds of technology. So majority of the new programs that are coming out in law enforcement require that internet connection to be able to power a lot of the stuff, you know, the body camera, you know, the computer system. So having that is like the great basic need for the patrol car, but then it's gonna have, you know, the modern safety equipment in it. And then it's gonna give, you know, that office space for each individual officer, you know. Those cars are running 20 hours a day and they get 4 hours of break, and it's getting shared, and, you know, gets a lot of wear and tear with that 20-hour use. But Allison could probably speak a lot more, but yeah, the cars we get, you know, a 2026 model versus some of the 2013s and 14s that are running around right now, they're nowhere. So just within the police interceptor type vehicles.
Well, and I think the other thing too is we, you know, we're gonna test a UV blade, an EV blazer and some other things. So we want to be modern and all that. But you take Charles and Colin and put them in a patrol car, an MDC in the middle and a rifle, and that's your work environment, and that thing's pushed up against you. So, you know, when we look at models, we have to take into that office workspace environment agronomically. And so it's a really important factor. But our promise to you is we will always try to make sure we're strategic. There's 100 vendors down at that Chiefs conference now with all these bells and whistles about technology and things they're trying to do to make the officers better. So great question.
Minimum for car and our basic upfitting is 75 hours.
The upfitting's a big deal. You buy the car, right? And then having to find upfitting companies, we have a pretty good one here in town and there's some big ones down there. But that whole process of upfitting is a whole nother supply chain, a whole nother block of time to try and get things out on the street. And so it's a really important part of the concept.
They used to laugh the way. I didn't normally like people do. I had to like go in this way. People make fun of it, but with that, I'll bring up Charles with, I'll talk to you about investigation. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, Chair Levin, committee members, colleagues. Charles Hernandez, I'm Deputy Chief Criminal Investigations. I want to preface this presentation on reminding you, last week we talked about the caseloads and the overburdens that the detectives carry in the unit with the collateral duties on top of the other mission focus we are trying to address in the community. So right now, based on the PFM study, it was recommended that we add 12 additional sworn investigators and 1 professional support service or support position in investigations. This aligns with the current volume and complexity of the cases and not future growth. So it basically says, hey, this is what you need to operate under what we're currently fielding as far as the caseload goes. And with this staffing adjustment, we estimate that the detective caseloads would be reduced from the current 250 to 300 caseloads per investigator down to approximately 120 to 150 cases per investigator. That represents roughly a 40 to 50% decrease in the workload that they're carrying. And then this is a significant number because previously we identified some gaps that we have is the victim focus or the victim centered approach from investigations. Because a lot of times, most of the calls we field in our unit is from the victim saying, hey, what's the status of my case? Where's my case at? What are you doing to address my case? What the reduction does, it means the difference between us reactively handling the cases and basically providing a thorough victim-centered investigation. So we put the victim first rather than trying to work other cases and prioritize the 120 to 150 cases that each individual detective will field. And that's roughly an annual caseload. And then, so at the 120 or 150 cases per detective, believe that this will enable the investigators to spend meaningful time with the victims, complete timely follow-up. I know some of these investigations, the statute of limitations allows us 7 years to try and catch someone who's responsible for the case. In the people crimes, it's indefinite, but completing timely follow-up is something that the victims expect from the investigators, and sometimes it's difficult to prioritize when they are carrying those heavy caseloads. Also, we're going to be able to conduct proactive offender-focused investigations as well. So we're actually going to be able to go out and look for the people who are committing the crimes instead of relying on an overstressed patrol division already, right? Because they're responding to calls, and we're going to task them to help us look for the offenders in these investigations. And also, what it's going to do for our unit, it'll help us build stronger cases for prosecution. So we'll work with the Coconino County Attorney's Office to ensure that there is some accountability for those offenders in the community. And then this is where the clearance rates improve and repeat offenders are removed from the community. Clearance rates, victim-centered focus approach, everyone will be happy with the service that we aim to provide, the elite service that the chief mentions in our mission. So what this staffing model also allows us to do, intentionally prioritize high harm crimes, include those ones that we mentioned previously, the sexual exploitation of the children, the trafficking in the community, the crimes against children, and then the organized and repeat violent offenders in the community. These crimes disproportionately harm individuals and the community and require time, specialization, and training and focus, and then continuity, all of which are staffing dependent. Like I said, with all the caseloads and the extra duties that these investigators carry, as well as evidence processing and analyzing evidence, it's a huge burden on them. So this number is significant for the investigation section to support the initial patrol response as well. So fiscally responsibility and efficiency as well from the unit. To emphasize how we are fiscally responsible with the staffing recommendation, if we increase investigative staffing, we're able to reduce overtime that's driven by overload, case overload. We're also able to reduce burnout and turnover in the section, as well as in the patrol division. We also ensure sworn investigators are doing investigative work and not administrative tasks. Managing cases seems tedious when the investigator is sitting at their desk trying to manage a caseload, trying to do other paperwork associated with the investigations. Rather now, with our reducing their caseload, they're able to actually go out and proactively service the victim how they are expected to. And then this is about us using existing resources more effectively. It's not just adding positions. It's an efficient and our current allocation with additional resources to be able to operationalize our unit in a proactive manner. And then so I just like briefly to, similar to Colin with our estimated costs. The estimated costs are the initial startups and then the ongoing costs as well with the 12 additional personnel. One thing I'd like to reference with the caseload and why that matters. Currently with our 250 to 300 cases, the impact's real right now. Investigations take longer, follow-ups delayed, victims again wait for long answers, cases become harder to prioritize. That's not a performance issue on the detective's part. It's more of a capacity issue. our capacity exceeds our capabilities with our staffing. Give you a brief example. We recently were reached out to by community members in north of the hospital. We had a string of burglaries, and the community's getting together to see what they can do and work with us, identify some trends, how they can work to protect themselves. So I took a look at one of the cases, and there was gold jewelry that was stolen and cash. Right, we can't track down cash; it's difficult. But when they identify jewelry, that they put gold jewelry, well, we have access to statewide pawn databases, countywide, and then local databases. So an input of the jewelry that we're looking for from the one victim in these strings of cases yielded 135,782 matches in a statewide database. All right. In the county database, there was 1,445 matches to that piece of jewelry. And then in the city, there was 1,443 matches. So what that investigator is going to have to do is they're going to have to get a photo of the jewelry that was stolen, the piece of article that was identified as a lily pendant. They're going to have to go to each database and see if there's a photo associated with that pawn report. And as you can imagine, 135,000 matches, it's a tedious task. That becomes more administrative, right? So then now you have to wonder, how do I prioritize my caseload as a detective? Am I going to try and identify this one piece of jewelry in that database? Or am I going to have to go try and work some other ones where maybe the matches are a little bit less and more manageable, right? So I'm going to try and use my time efficiency because there is a lot of information to process with investigations. So in closing, just after that brief example, our staffing recommendation from PFM directly reduces detective caseloads by half. For victims, accountability for serious offenders, and strengthens public safety with a clear return on investment from our investigation unit. Measured data-driven adjustment to ensure our investigations keep pace with the realities of the crime in our community. Helps us make sure that we fill that gap, ensuring that we have those touch points with them and work their case through to hopefully and ultimately the prosecution and making sure we remove those offenders from the community. That's where on how that will be beneficial for us. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
This is Michelle. I have a question. Oh, hello. I'm sorry. I'm not hearing you very well. Yeah, could you tell me if you have the figure you've given of 3 million plus some is startup, or is that ongoing each year costs?
Yeah, it was both. The initial startup is similar to the patrol because our personnel from investigations would have to ultimately come through patrol. Because our section is made up of tenure individuals with some experience and additional training as opposed to a new officer just joining the police department.
So it's similar to what how it was broken out for patrol then, the 1.6 and the 1.8 million?
Yeah, similar
Okay.
to that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I have one thing. When I looked at the data, as a patrol deputy chief, I'm like, what do you need? More detectives than we need patrol officers. And one thing they said in their study, there's not, I think, a department in America that they've studied or done an assessment on where the need is higher in detectives. Because what always happens is patrol, to deliver core services, we take detectives and have not filled their unit to be able to provide those 911 responses. So that's why, we've neglected for decades
the criminal investigations division, because my father-in-law was in the unit, and I imagine it was probably the same size in the eighties and nineties as it is today. So that's kind of why that number is like that. So, it's increases in both, but, why is it more in detectives? It's because we always take detectives patrol, so a little responsible.
For support services, much like detectives, that number has not changed in 25 years. Well, we have not seen increases other than onesies and twosies here and there. The biggest change we have seen in professional staff has been the police aides, the addition of police aides. Outside of that, we have not changed numbers, especially in dispatch. That number has stayed the same. So what you see is that almost in every section, we're seeing doubles increases in staffing. In some places, positions that don't exist currently, like a supervisor for animal control, a lead for evidence technician, property control doubling to manage the amount of vehicles and property that they manage. What Chiefs didn't talk about is that it wasn't just data. They pulled all of our data. They pulled CAD, they pulled records management, they pulled all of our stuff. Payroll, how much time people take off, how much time are they allotted. They pulled all these numbers, but they also met with every person in the department. They sat down with every work group and asked them, what do you experience? How much work do you do? Where are you missing things? What's working well and what's not working well? And in a lot of these, property control is one of them, they get asked from patrol a lot. They don't work weekends and they don't work nights. And so they're not able to see those officers and they aren't able to assist those officers as well. If they had twice as much staff, we could have people on nights and weekends to get the staff that works nights and weekends, to help them get the equipment that they need to make sure that they have what they need to do their jobs. Evidence technicians. Everything that evidence technicians do, for the most part, requires two of them. Doing drug burns, they're doing destruction of property, it takes two evidence technicians. If one of those people are out, they can't do that. Backs us up on our purge. It requires two at all times to do a lot of the duties that they do. And then administrative specialists, one of the big things that PFM pointed out is that we have one person that is responsible for entering our time and our payroll for every single person in our, and she does it by hand based off of spreadsheet. We don't have anybody else with the exception of me, very, very, very little. We don't have anybody that has that redundancy and skill. We don't have anybody else that can step in if she's not there to do the job. And a lot of our administrative positions, a lot of our positions are doing duties. We have a lot of backpacks and we don't have redundancy in those skills. So if somebody can't make it in, doesn't make it in, get hits by a bus, there's nobody to pick up the slack for that.
We
And-
love Francita.
We all like
She
getting
gets us all
paid. And it's often that
But
she's
she's
working
busy.
weekend. When you're putting in time for a 24/7 machine where people are always working, you kind of always have to work too, to make sure that that time is entered and it's entered in correctly. And then Casey's gonna come give you
On
bit on
dispatch, and
dispatch.
I think Allison undersells it a little bit. We are using Excel spreadsheets to track our time in 2026, to enter it, to have it checked, to have it emailed, to have it taken from an Excel spreadsheet, to put in a different platform, to go to the next step, to get converted into the next platform for payroll in 2026. For the whole department, yep.
Does the rest of the city do that too? Like, is it a spreadsheet or, I mean, there seems to be a lot of other programs you could use as far as payroll.
Many of us have been using spreadsheets for a long time. They've been transitioning to a system called Kronos. That have been keeping groups like the police department to go last, given the complexity of both police and their various shifts and how they work. And so they've been transitioning 1 to 2 divisions at a time. Those two will more than likely go last just due to that complexity.
Ours is very specific and very complicated. Dispatch alone has how many different codes for time?
Oh, we'd sit at 12 to 18, fire 50 plus, 40 plus pay codes. Different different combinations of how that time exists with overtime, straight time with assignment pay, overtime with assignment pay, holiday time with assignment pay, overtime, like all those combinations, 54 different combinations within.
I get that. I also work in a 24-hour unit. I know the complexities of like what that payroll looks like. And so that's why I was like, a spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Painful.
Yeah.
It's gotta be painful. And there's so many of you. That's why I was wondering if the whole city was like that or just you guys left.
Some of the regular 40-hour straight, no additional extras is done a little, it's simpler payroll system, but the complexities with it through the existing Chronos system or existing payroll just isn't there to get a modernized system.
So when you say they'll be the last to go, when is last? Like when? Is that this year or next?
I'm not sure I have the answer.
Yeah. It's on a treadmill
Yeah.
somewhere.
Transitioned pros, that was the last group that they've just done. And they've run into problems with like split shifts.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, they're working through that group right now and then they'll pick up the next one. But they're doing it just based on trying to balance workload. Because our payroll group, I want to say, is what, 3 for our entire organization. And so trying to do that workload on top of just regular everyday. And they're also implementing the next couple of years as well.
So you have one person at the police department that does the payroll for everybody?
180 employees.
180?
Yep.
I mean, and nobody else knows how to do that?
Have it at a time.
I'm always
But-
willing to jump in if we need to.
But she's the one that knows it the best.
Been doing it the longest. So
Is she due to retire?
She could.
Like,
We had that conversation the other day.
Payroll?
she's about a year out. She's online, so I'd like to give her an opportunity to add anything to this payroll conversation if she'd like to. Brandy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, just that we have 4 members and yes, we are trying to implement, but given the age of our current payroll system, it is very challenging to implement new groups with the Chronos software. So until we get a more robust ERP system, which we are next on IT's list to start working on identifying a new ERP system for the city as a whole. It'll be very challenging to implement any additional divisions within Chronos.
Yeah. Kind of speechless, but yeah, it does.
Quickly piggyback with the dispatch side onto what Chief C was talking about when you're talking workload, sleep to work ratios. We've been at a point, they're looking at adding 10 additional dispatchers into there. That 34 number, we currently have 6 supervisors on top of that, which are not supervising. They're basically in the mix of the 30 dispatchers that we look at that we're currently allotted for, which takes away from training, quality control, quality assurance. New hire onboarding has to get mixed in with everything else that we're doing. At a point as we were trying to rebuild and get to where we're going, 16-hour days that people were working. So you take 16, you drive home, get wound down, go to sleep, get back up, and you're back. That 8-hour window is not 8 hours that you're taking that work rest ratio. And then doing it 6, 7, 8, 9 days in a row. Not ideal, not functional, not long-term. We've since, with the hiring we've done, been able to start to bring that down with some work-life balance. But we sit at a point with being basically, 30-40% short of what we should be, where that's taking a huge mental toll, physical toll, family toll that's going on day to day. And you have days today where we had staffing, new training that then gets taken away immediately with what was going on in the community, where dispatchers are now getting pulled to run those channels and those events. We don't have the ongoing training or support or new hires getting the training, just slowing that down and delaying it. So the mental toll that's taken on dispatchers is compounded, and then that rolls into what's going on patrol of those calls coming in and getting out efficiently. So I just wanted to put that in there. Awesome. So, yeah.
Okay, I have another question. So if you were, I mean, I would think that you're needing to hire another payroll specialist. Where is that
The
person?
admin specialist, that's the title. So we have two and we need two.
Yes, okay, great. I just wanted to be clear on.
So we have one that does payroll specifically, a little bit of onboarding stuff, and the other one does all of our travel, our training, our miscellaneous billing, and manages the chief's calendar. Me right now,
That's you too?
right now.
Okay.
We're hiring, if anybody's interested.
Mary's, quick question, and I'm not sure if it's answerable, but I think in answering her questions, we all kind of understand that the payroll system is antiquated. If we could imagine a world where it wasn't, we'll need that many people.
Yes. I think there's enough, I think the one other person, we have one admin that does just payroll for the most part, and then we have one that's doing travel and training. These other things. There's a lot more that they could help support in the admin team as a whole. The budget, there's a lot of other things that they could do. And just our state reporting in itself is a full-time job. So there's a lot of stuff that those admins could be doing. And we'll talk about it. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about it. Part of our asks is a specific payroll system, or at least a timekeeping system that's public safety specific, that already has the ability to build out those codes. So that is kind of in our asks moving forward.
Thank you.
Fleet expansion. So this is our 1-for-1, one vehicle per officer, or vehicle per office. Share that you don't have to share with anybody else unless your car goes down, it's going for service. Cost it's 30 vehicles to get to where we should be for the amount of patrol staff we have on the line. And then including that is the cost to include that is if we get a 1-for-1, that potentially we could go down to a replacement schedule of 4 a year. Right now, we see asks of 10 to 13 plus vehicles replacement per year based off of the ones that have excessive mileage, mechanical issues, or we've just lost for one reason or another throughout the year. If we had a 1-for-1 where we're using those vehicles half as much as we are currently using them, ideally, we'd like to see year replacement cycle. That's what that cost is. Adding police aid vehicles, probably need to edit that. All of our police aid vehicles were one-time patrol vehicles that we just pushed down to police aids as we added them. So most of those have been miled out or should be miled out and need to be replaced. So replacing those and adding some for the additional staff. And then an incident command vehicle.
Yeah, so, if we're managing events downtown, a crime scene in the winter, where you have to have a mobile office and you're gonna be out there for 10, 12 hours sometimes, having a mobile command vehicle that can pull up to that crime scene, provide places for witnesses that we're going to try to keep on scene to get out of the weather or go into a comfortable place to have interviews, places for incident command to co-locate unified command with fire on whether it's a fire, whether it's an event or pre-planned or unplanned. Having that modern mobile command vehicle that has all the technology in it is just one of the best practices. Right now, we have an old RV.
You don't like my
It's a
1999
old-
Winnebago?
Yeah, it's a little, great job doing things with what you have, right? But, we could go over to the KOA together in it and enjoy it
Tell her how
at
we
the
got it,
same
tell her
day.
how we got it.
But a modern police vehicle that has all those communications in it, has the ability for fire and all of us to sit in there and run scenes and do things, manage evidence, make phone calls, is a goal of ours in our strategic plan.
The RV was a Metro seizure that we got and.
The drug seizure.
The drug seizure. And underneath the floorboard, underneath the bed, pounds of marijuana.
That's after the case had been like.
And that was after the case had been closed.
The offender, and then 10 years later it came to us. There was still more.
I love it. Yeah, so, let's talk a little bit about capital improvement as we move forward. There's three big buckets in this for us that we've identified in our capital improvement plan, for the next 5 years or so. The first one is the north expansion. The second one is you saw, evidence of the evidence warehouse needing a rehab. Right now to the community, right now, if you get property, you're coming to headquarters to our main lobby and they're having to go back in through the building to the property and bring it back out to you. It's really important to have a public facing space for community to come pick up their property and access that as an annex. So those are the three. Well, the second one is with Fire's vision and what we know is going on with growth along the JW Powell, having a substation down there. That one's a little further down in the priority. This one, evidence, are our first two priorities. I just wanted to give you a snapshot. This is our current footprint. This is the county side of the house. This is the jail over here. This right here, just south of this green lawn is our main building. So what you see here is all this green space. That's kind of, for those online, that's circular. And then if you go to the left of that, you see those two dead spaces on each side of the entrance. That's currently where we store, you see them there. We store very expensive, big equipment, bomb vehicles at times, and a whole bunch of other things out in the elements out there. It's also a place for snow dumping, but the vision, and it was set before my arrival, and kudos to Chief Musselman and Shannon and everybody working to get us to a place of expanding out into that. So we've entered the design phase of this, if I'm saying that right, hopefully, where we've worked with a company that's built this out for us. So when you see this map here, in that dead space where I told you the entrance is, to the left, you see a large vehicle storage and SWAT operation. And then you see where our motors, that MAC van would go, that mobile command, and then some drone support for the future. These are going to be built like fire stalls to be able to pull right out onto Sawmill and be able to come in and access. So that's the first phase of that. The second phase of the north expansion is building this new building. And I'll talk a little bit more about it. Here's a little blow up of the large vehicle storage. You see those stalls for that big equipment, multiple armored bear and Bearcats, bomb vehicles, and a whole bunch of other equipment. You can see how they'll be able to fit right in there. There's also a SWAT team room. So they have right now, the SWAT team doesn't have a separate place to debrief or brief out when they're going to go on a barricade or hit something. So this becomes a SWAT team room, and it has some restrooms and some decon in it. On the other side of that driveway, currently our motorcycles have these really cool canvas covers, and they're outside and they're underneath the Ramada. You would want those stored inside. It just adds to the life of the motorcycle. You also see this vehicle evidence processing stall in this build out. That stall, currently, if we have a homicide vehicle or anything, we bring it back to the station. We process it a little on scene. We bring it back to the station, and under the Ramada, we process evidence, really high scientific evidence at times, depending on the weather and how that goes. That is not a best practice. What you do with those vehicles, you put them in a sterile stall, and you process that to the most granular level. My story on that is a serial shooter in the valley. A casing was found in his BMW way up under the floorboard, but we literally methodically, under almost like an operation table, took that car apart, and it was that one casing that made that case. So that's in there. That's some more room for the command vehicle, and I talked about the drone workshop, again with some restrooms. This whole thing is just under 9,000 square feet for the vehicle stall. When you look at this diagram, if you look over to the far left, this is the north expansion. What it has in it is defensive tactics room. Currently, we have no space for defensive tactics. It has a fitness workout room. There's currently a small one in the current building. This would build out a modern fitness workout room, and then a classroom and a place for simulators and additional virtual-like training. It also involves a staff training room. Currently, we only have a briefing room, and if you're briefing, you can't be training in it. So this would create a training room. This area, I'm really hopeful for on a lot of levels. This is our wellness section. It'll have a recharge room. It'll have a bunk, couple bunks in case we get to a place even where we got to spend the night where officers can go and lay down. In this, you put things like sauna, red light therapy, and cold plunging as part of and a massage chair as part of a full wrap of wellness when you blend that in with those programs. This is not extra nowadays in modern police departments. I could take you to a whole bunch of them that have this wellness component. When we talk about that PTSD, you've heard about the suicide rate in this police department. This type of stuff is important. And then here's an updated modern locker room. I think you saw the picture of our locker room with the boots on. And if we're going to be trying to scale out additional, there's no room right now. So having a place for over 200 lockers, modern police lockers that fit all the gear, is in there. That's about 12,900 square feet. A lot of this that's currently in this current building on the right will come over here, and then there'll be a renovation of this side that'll free up offices for the sergeants and the lieutenants and patrol operation briefings, investigation offices for the detectives, and investigation briefing with a mutual conference room. There'll be a little bit of a remodel that goes on with the comms room. That renovation is about 17,000 square feet. Any questions on any of that? The number we're seeing on this, when you put those three square footage together, is just a little under $25 million is what our initial estimate was for that north expansion. So the two stall buildings, the north expansion building, and then the renovation of the current building. Evidence warehouse, you already heard from Allison eloquently on the challenges of this. So we currently have a facility that has only received minor updates. We can go on a field trip and be powerful. Storage capacity is limited. I don't need to go through. She broke this down a lot of some of the challenges. This stuff should not be touching each other. It should be categorized. It should almost have the feel of an Amazon warehouse, and it should be coded and properly stored, and everything should be marked. There is some issues with the roof. I think we got that redone or getting it. Yeah, to get this redone to make sure weather's not coming on this evidence, but it should not be stored like this. That rehab on that is approximately $3.8 million. And that includes getting that public facing, about 1,500 square foot public access to property, building off the edge of the property. The city currently has this property. It stores vehicles on one section of it. There's a cell tower. I think there's a cell tower on it for some other stuff. So we have that property. So there's a little bit of the estimates that I was talking about. We put all of these buckets into one bucket. That the new building at Leaf, the interior renovation, the large vehicle storage. When we talk about the site work that needs to still be done, the evidence warehouse, and then that JW Powell substation. And that's a conservative number because we're not in design phase with that yet. We're looking at approximately 30,652,000 for our capital improvements on those three missions that we have identified.
Just real quick, how many bids do we have to get? Is there a required, do we get 2 or 3 bids at least? Probably know that.
It all depends on the procurement process. It's probably PMAR, so it'd be, correct me at any point, it'll probably be qualifications based first, then be negotiated. So it'd be an alternate delivery method rather than straight up old school hard bid and then litigate later.
I will tell you at the Chiefs Conference, a lot of the big construction companies and design companies are down there. And I was asking some of the chiefs about their projects. Chandler just wrapped up some, Apache Junction, Goodyear has wrapped up some. Daisy Fire just is involved in something right now too. Those cost ranges are running anywhere from $642 a square foot to $1,000 a square foot. So that's the world we're in. Question? That's our capital improvement costs, and then it's kind of our strategic vision on those three. Technology, I want to talk, this is one of our dispatchers monitoring a whole bunch of scenes, running foot pedals and listening to a whole bunch of things. But there's a lot more to technology on this. I think This happened. You give the chief the clicker. This is what happened.
Go back.
So I want to talk a little bit about technology while she's loading that up. Yeah, you know what? I think it's about, I have a 6-minute video that really puts all the technology together from a 911 call to the end of the scene. What I'll ask you to do, I think just for the sake of time, because I want to make sure we have some conversation. This has been shared with you. I think it's in the link, right, Shannon? They have the ability to take some time to really go home, and it's a really cool video. You'll see the real-time crime center helping the operator. You'll see the body camera translating in Spanish, helping put out a suspect description. You'll see the draft one AI report writing. You'll see all of this technology coming together in about a 6-minute clip. Let's go ahead and just go to the, watch that on your free time. Yeah, we'll just skip it. Really well done video. It's 6 minutes. 6 minutes. As it relates to technology, I kind of liken it to if we were having a conversation about all of us going on a road trip. And I said, yeah, you know what? We can't use Google Maps. We're all gonna have to get out a paper map and let's go to Canada together. And you're not allowed to use your phone and your Google Maps. I think that's kind of the mindset for me in building the analogy is where we're going. We want to be able to have that modern basic technology to do our job. The vision in this too with our Northern Arizona Integrated Regional Ops Center is to bring all that into one hub. Bring it all into one hub for the region. This will allow us to make decision-making and situational awareness in real time. This will allow us to coordinate responses across a sheriff's department, a campus university, a college, a highway patrol. And it allows us to do multiple public service functions at one time, leveraging all this technology to monitor it. The purpose of this is in real time. That's where we are in life. Real time with everything we do. We want to make sure we're improving our public safety footprint with that. It's faster, it's coordinated, it's efficient. You spend a little money on the one time, but what we're seeing, and I was just talking to some of the guys down there running these, they're seeing so much efficiency on the patrol deployment and the investigative deployment by having all this data and all this video and all this come through one center. It also for emergency preparedness. I know Stacy's in here and Daniel's in here. When we really talk about having something where we need to get together, augmenting what we currently do and having this operations center to bring everybody together to manage an event is paramount. When we broke this center out for our needs from a personnel, contractual and commodity, we're looking at about a $1.6 million get going on this. Okay. You do have to have somebody in there running it. There's pilots that are involved in the drone operations. There's data analysts that are involved in this. Comms operators are involved in these. It's bringing it all together. Any questions on the?
Constitutes commodity.
Give me a great example. Yeah, just kind of the nuts and bolts of what we have to do to get things.
Setup costs.
Yeah. When
Can I
we
ask
look at, yeah, question.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I had a quick question. Yeah, thank you. The 1.6 million, is that all to get all the computers and all the technology that you need and not necessarily long-term operation?
Yes.
Yes, okay, that's what I thought, but thank you for clarifying. Thanks.
So when we look at the pressure of new technology in policing as a form of legitimacy, you heard me talk about that paper map. We want to be able to look at the world through a satellite rather than a paper map. The job stays the same though. The trip we're going to take is still going to be the same trip, road trip for the family at the end of the day. So I don't want to misconstrue that. but being able to leverage this helps us see better, helps us understand better, and helps us act and change and be agile better. I already talked a little bit how it makes us smarter, more efficient. Those old systems are trapped in old boxes. To get rid of some boxes or at least build bridges to those boxes so that these modern tools can take that raw information that's living in our records management systems on behalf of victims and really operationalize it. When we're stretched thin, I will tell you, there are these initial investments, but the data is starting to come in on these types of technology enhancements, and we can speak to some of the software that we're having to use. But once it's up and running, we start to see tremendous efficiency in our operations. And I just think it's a really wise way to do work. Crime and criminals are evolving. And so we will cease to exist if we don't evolve with them and with what is modern in community. We always would say that if criminals were smart, we wouldn't have jobs. There's something to say for that, but at the end of the day, as you watch very complicated crimes and tools, whether it's phones or things being used to commit crimes, we've got to stay on top of that. So when we look at our ongoing needs this next year related to our new technology, when we talk about supporting patrol with equipment, criminal investigations with software, radio systems and support services software, that's a $599,000 price tag related to new technology for the department to just stay up to speed with what's going on. Anything from your perspective else on that?
One of the biggest things, and I out a few times when they've spoken about budget, is it's like going from DVD system to streaming service. There isn't the amount of one-time costs that previously with technology and equipment, that one-time initial dollar cost. It's ongoing costs. Everything is subscription based. So all these programs, there's an ongoing cost to keep access to it.
So current operations as it relates to ongoing expenses that are being funded with one-time available dollars in the general fund. Again, trying to keep this as simple as possible for all of us. And I know you're going to get more time with Rick, I think, to have additional questions and understand the magic that he does with that. But when we look at personnel costs, contractual costs, and commodity, this is what we're looking at into the next year that we fund one time that is ongoing. And so that's a $3.1 million price tag, 1 million for personnel, 1.8 contractual, and about $335,000 for commodity for this next year as we move forward. I'll have Allison come up and walk you through a little bit of this as it relates to the overall budget. That's the last.
I know it's last slide. So this is a budget overview of the last 5 years, this year and going back, of what our base allocated budget, operating base budget over the years. So this year we're seeing about $2.2 million of base operations. Personnel costs are $20 million. So that total operating cost is at 22.6. Then we have things like one-time money. That bucket is made up of stuff that got carried forward, purchases we weren't able to make in the previous year or spend gets rolled over. If we're smart, we remember to ask to roll it over. Some of that is pension liability. What else did I say that bucket had it in it?
Carryover for the shooting range.
Carryover for the shooting range was 1.1. So some of those one-time buckets, and then that list of ongoing one-time things, the things we ask for every year, that there's an ongoing cost, our radio system within AU. This last year was the first year we actually got it added into our ongoing budget, but in years past, we asked for that every year. Even though we know that we're in a 10-15 year contract for our radio maintenance, we had to ask for that money. Our Axon contract, we get that money one time. Knowing that it costs us $600,000 per year of a 5-year contract, we just signed that. We'll have to ask for that $600,000 again. So that makes up that bucket. And then we had about 3.9 million in grants this last year, or this current year.
We'll be able to see more detail in the.
Yeah.
I know when I submit my budgets, it's like you have the line item, then you have the overview, so I can see the overview. Just kind of getting an idea of what that detail looks like.
Yes.
A little more clarity.
And I think that's really important, because I think you'll be able to see that. But for this conversation, we just wanted to give you that big, high level picture baseline for our 2 hours together. And I think, with Rick and with Fire Chief and I will be available as we go through, we'll be able to break that out a little more. Any questions on any of that? I do really hope yes, sir.
So it seems like we have a very large request, sure. When they went through the budget last year, how much of this was presented to city council that we are lacking in our existing budget?
I will start this and then I'll invite Rick Tatter to fill in the blanks that I might miss. So we actually do all of the presentations to what we call a budget team. It's made up of the city manager's office, finance, budget, personnel, and then some of our division directors have previously participated on that as well. And the reason we do that is we then take a recommended budget to council. And so the recommended budget to council includes highlights of this is what we were able to fund with what we have in one-time capacity and ongoing capacity. It does not get down into the line item budget just because that would take we actually meet for 3 weeks to build every day for 8 hours to build a recommended budget for council to consider. And so what we give them is much more high level because we typically have 2 days to be able to present that to them.
Their budget retreat a whole,
Consideration. I'm sorry?
the budget retreat a whole week? It's only 2 days?
No, it's only 2 days.
But the city council isn't aware of these full areas of improvement that we need to work on that's lacking for national standards, and not just our law enforcement, but also multiple areas throughout the city. So a lot of what we're being presented here is new information for the council members themselves as well. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, I mean, what we share with them is, for instance, that we have 43 positions that were requested and we were able to fund 7 of them. Right? But we don't necessarily give them a list of what every single one of those positions would be, like we're presenting the details to you now, if that makes sense.
And I'll cover this up. I'll say from the labor side of it, we do communicate those with them. Not, we don't sit down and go line, but there is information that is taken forward of shortfalls with it needed versus what's available or versus what is going through budget high level. So to the nitty gritty, no, but there are instances where they're aware of shortcomings within there. Yeah.
And I think to add, if I'm not mistaken, all of our requests are memorialized. And then there is the decision made about what we can actually do by Rick and his team, and then direction. And so if the question was, hey, who's seen these asks? I think if you wanted to see the fire department's ask historically and our department's ask historically, there is a place for them to look at those, correct?
Yeah, so, and again, Heidi or Rick, if you want to add, we actually track all of those requests. And we have a spreadsheet where we put, this is what we're able to fund one time, this is what we're able to fund ongoing. So that way we're balancing at the end of that process to the capacity that we have. And so there have been years, I don't know if it's every year, where we actually give all of those details to council so they can see every single line item that was asked by each division and what we funded and what wasn't funded, to be able to demonstrate that there's significant needs.
Don't they also have the ability to go in and line item if they want to spend the time to do that?
They have access to the PBB system. It actually lumps it by program, so it's not going to be that line item entry, but it would be by program. Rick, Heidi, is there anything else that you would want to add?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well. Thank you, Shannon.
Thanks.
One thing from a position standpoint, like if I'm running 15, 20 vacancies, it's hard for me, even with the data supporting what the police department should be for the workload stuff. It's hard for me to go to the budget team and say, hey, I need 5 extra positions, because they're gonna tell me, well, fill the 20 vacancies that you have right now. But as we stand in 2026, I looked in the recruiter's office today, they got 10 candidates and backgrounds for 4 positions. We're gonna fill those and send them to the academy. So in 2026, we're there and we're ready to now, expand these programs to achieve the workload.
That's such a great point, because we've all lived these, knowing what the staffing model should be, knowing what you're currently allocated, and then not being able to look city managers, community, or finance directors, and you say, I need more position. You can't even fill what you currently have. And so we've had some tough conversations about that, right? I think that's a really important part of this. But to Colin's point, where we currently are, we don't have more job offers. So we've done a great job of getting what's allocated to us and projecting for this next academy class to be there. Because I think that is important. Yes, sir.
Maybe following up on your question, what's been going on in my mind, these are some eye-watering numbers, and demonstrated, as did previous presenters, the need for these things. And so I find myself wondering, I think much like you did, how did we get here? And probably wasn't just last year's budget cycle, but a number of budget cycles. And so, I'm not sure what I'm asking, but it seems like maybe it's been a 10-year or more role of maybe not addressing these needs that put us in a position that.
You're looking at a guy coming out of his rookie season here. And I know there's Mark Wilson, Chief Gaylord, Shannon, and there's a lot more seniority, and I can't speak to the historical on that and those ramifications. Our focus was focusing on what we currently have and what we're doing with what we currently have, and knowing strategically what this community's needs are going to be into the next 5 to 10 years on all these fronts. I think those conversations related to what was done historically would be outside my purview on that, just to be completely honest on it. Yeah, and what you focus on, you get more of in life, is something I try to live by. And I think the historical is important, but I think what you're hearing from this public safety family is, people are hurting a little bit. They're burnt out. It's tough. Our equipment's old or it needs to be modernized. Our buildings, and we're really trying as ambassadors of safety to have a strategic, responsible vision for the next 5 to 10 years on what the needs of this place are, knowing and having a realization of what the current capacity of the general fund is.
If I could maybe just add a couple points, because we've had some new members join our team, and so I about kind of that history of budget. And the way I've described it is it's kind of a stacking effect. We had a recession in 2008 that required we cut 19% and greater from our organization. And from a personnel perspective, it took us until about 2020, 2021 to get almost back to that level where we were in 2008. And when you think about how our community has changed between 2008 and today, we didn't just go back to where we were in 2008. We've had significant growth and significant change within our community. So we've been able to address to get back to where we were, but we haven't been able to keep up with the growth. And a big part of that is that ongoing revenue component. We can't hire people with one-time dollars, because if we don't have the one-time dollars next year, what do we do? Do we hire, lay off? That's not effective. And so I think it's really that stacking effect. We've been trying to get back to where we were and to keep up with growth, but we can only do that within the capacity that we have available. And so I would say probably for at least the last 2, maybe 3 years, we've been talking to council about additional revenue opportunities that could bring in additional money into the general fund. not only to address things in public safety, but just organization wide. I think you saw part of that last year with the water rate study, because again, they've had some of those stacking effects. You'll see some additional rate studies coming forward. We just had council approval of that cost recovery. I think it was last week. So there are things happening, but there's a balance, right? Yes, we have needs as an organization, but there's also impact to the community. And we hear from community members that it's too many increases, it's too much. And so how do you find that balance? And that's part of why having the community input as part of this process is super important, so that we can understand what it looks like from that community perspective to help us find that balance before we take it to the greater number of folks.
I appreciate that perspective. And I guess, just to be clear, the reason I'm asking that question about history, because if we were to look at and say, hey, maybe we made some mistakes in allocation in the previous 10 years, and that's why we're here. In addition to looking to new revenue opportunities, I think it would also be wise to go back and say, well, gosh, do we need to take a harder look at what we did in the past and maybe change some of that going forward? Anyway, just my thoughts.
I'm curious, at the beginning of the meeting, you mentioned something about increasing expectations on immigration, like from the federal level. And I'm just curious about that, along with any federal funding piece. I know nothing about that.
Yeah, and I don't think and if I did, I'm not increasing expectations. Again, I think what I said was, I was at a Chiefs conference and there's some big items that we're all talking about. Our people, our staffing, our capital, our fleets, our technology. There was also we're having intense conversations about federal immigration right now, as it relates to that. As it relates to federal funding, I know this department had received a COPS grant back in the day for officer positions. And I know in the grants world, we are constantly keeping our eyes on federal funding that can augment and help us with our staffing models, in addition to these appropriations that you hear from the state to help us on these things. As it relates to current federal grants that are helping us right now in the police department, Allison, I'm not aware of any federal. Yeah, some of the JAG, but that's washed then in through the state. And then I sit, I think it's really important that we represent. I think that there needs to be more of this advocacy for this region down at the Capitol. I was recently appointed by the governor to the ACJC, the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission, that is kind of this funnel approving point for where all this funding goes around, me and Hammond Barker. And we're going to ring the bell about the needs of this community related to that. I know there's a lot of advocacy in emergency management for these types of things. I mean, Stacy, you get a chance to hear from her on how just aggressive she is, and the fire departments are constantly trying to do that. So from the state buckets and the federal buckets, we're always constantly trying to keep an eye on that. I will preface though, a lot of times we've done things, especially in community, where we get funding from the feds for a program, or we get funding from the state for a program, and we implement, and there's a timeline on that, and it expires. But this business doesn't expire. The needs don't expire. They don't continue. And then the community and all of us are standing on the corner going, where did everybody go? Right? The grants have gone, this is gone. Sometimes, there's matching monies on these that add complexity. And so if you're going to accept something that's going to build something temporarily, you have to be wise, because when it dries up, Rick's going to go, well, who's going to pay for it afterwards? When it dries up, right? That you've built that into your model. So it's really really insightful question. But don't mix the immigration enforcement into some of this. I don't think that right now is something that's not part of what we're talking about related to budget and those types of things. And if I misspoke, I apologize.
Very sloppy question, but I've just heard people talking about how the federal government is defunding police departments, and part of that is the shift towards like federal oversight and immigration. And I'm not that plugged into that part of funding.
Yeah, I'm not aware in our chiefs worlds. I'm not aware of that concept. Yes, sir.
One more question that I should have asked last week when you guys were doing your presentation on the call center and on the city. I'm just curious, and if you covered this, missed it or forgot it, I apologize in advance, but are there hotspots? What are the hotspots? If you go to,
That's what I study. I mean, our top location for calls for service is 185 East Bennington, which is Flagstaff Shelter Services. It's the emergency no barrier shelter in the community. So they're taking everyone to include mental health and addiction and drug usage. That is, we have victimization there probably, I think this year about 575 victims of crime. It's our number one place for arrest.
Stretcher road to that Huntington stretch right there.
Yeah.
Is that the same from fire department?
It does stretch out into Huntington on the 89 into Bushmaster Park, Park Santa Fe. Yeah, it's everywhere, but I'm always an optimist. Like the community is better. Like when I started in 2006, some of those social problems were all over the community. Now that shelter is providing service there, so food and shelter is there. So, you know, we have railroad tracks that run through there, and sadly, we're having 7 or 8 people hit by those tracks every single year. So there's a lot of social issues over there. That's our hotspot. The hospital is always going to be one of our top locations. Our Walmarts for larceny thefts.
I think the other one, John, one of the first things I always have a keen eye on public transportation. And when we're in process of refreshing this, and I spoke at Mountain Line on this, we were between 800 and 1,000 calls for service in and around bus stops. And so that's busy. You got 2,000 over at the shelter. You've got another bucket of around 1,000 in the hospital. We start looking at those bug lights of busyness, right? And so we strategize in deployment and operational plans on those. But I would say those, and I think we shared a hotspot map earlier in the patrol. Those locations provide us some of our most busiest work.
Walks through May downtown, Friday, Saturdays, nights.
Question. Anything else on this before I wrap this for y'all? I just want to say, this is our family here. These are some pictures of all of us and what we do. We love this community. There are images here, and there's people here that have given their lives, their professional lives to this community on so many levels. And I just want to make sure you hear that from us. We've tried to take the last couple days to just kind of explain who we are, what we do, our vision for where we want to be modern and in a best mode of service for what is just an amazing community. That is a progressive community, that is forward thinking in a lot of ways. And so I think in those same veins, public safety should get that same attention related to that progressiveness and that modern thinking. And so that was our mission over the last couple days. I'm really grateful for the timeline and the symmetry of our outside assessment. You came together there, and I wanted you to know the full thing's gonna be available for you for that. And so this was just us trying to paint a picture of what we do, how we're currently doing it, a little bit of the historical and the storytelling related to that, and then identifying as stewards. We're stewards of this community's tax money in a lot of ways, and we're stewards of the budget as we move forward, how we think the best way to methodically move through what are going to be needs for this public safety family over the next 5 to 10 years. So it's just thank you. And hopefully it was valuable for you. I know you're going to have some more conversations with another amazing piece of our public safety family, and then more conversations, I think, with Rick and some others. We're always available for you anytime to answer these questions of this community. Men and women are out there right now, standing on a doorstep after a 911 call, giving everything they have for the safety of this community. Okay. Is there anything else or any questions of us while you got us? Back down to a Chiefs conference. Means a lot coming from all of you. Okay.